Welcome to Cedar's Compass, where we explore the dynamic interplay between our inner landscape and our planet's ecology. Delve deep into the worlds of science, medicine, and philosophy as we discover the threads that weave us into the larger tapestry of life on Earth.
In Taoist thought, we look at the world through a lens that's made up of 8 principles. Today, I want to look at one pair of principles that make up those 8: excess and deficiency. Excess and deficiency are probably just what you would think they are, right? In simplest terms, excess means too much of something. And deficiency means not enough of something. And within this Taoist framework, this observational framework, the application of this pair, excess and deficiency, allows us to discern in a living system where there are imbalances and how those imbalances could be supported or altered by applying the opposite, right? So here's an example. If I looked at a person who came into me and their face was red and they were hot and they were upset and they just really had a big anger going on, and this is a man, they're 24 years old, they've just been through something really intense. This is a person that is in an excess state. I would say that they have a relative excess in this moment of energy. And it gets to be a very nuanced thing. We get into the liver and stagnation of energy there, emotional blockage, whatever that could lead to this excess state. But in that state of this person being in excess, my approach to them in the kind of Wu way, right, bringing balance, finding the middle way, would be to then calm the system down, right? I would want to provide things that were cooling, placating, soothing, calming it down, right? Whereas if someone else came in and they were pale, they were thin, they were sad, they were in this, a place where you could tell their energy was very low and depleted, like they maybe even were cold. There was somebody who came in and they presented in this way, I would say, oh wow, this person is in a relative deficient state. That person, then I would say, how would I help them find balance if they were looking for it? Well, I would want to then tonify them. I would want to support them. I would want to lift them up. I would want to nourish them, bolster them, right? And I would want to try to do that in order to support where the deficiency is to create more of a balanced state. And these are really simple examples, yet this basic structure of having 8 principles that you can look, you can create a lens out of and look at a person through allows us to identify the nature of a condition so that we can then understand better what's the nature of the therapy or the material that I want to apply to this person. I want to give another example of excess and deficiency, okay? An excess in terms of, let's say a medical condition. Like, let's say you're caring for somebody in your life and they come in and they have a fever, let's say, right? And people oftentimes get afraid of a fever. We're going to talk about this at length at some point because fevers are really important to understand. But there's a deficiency type of fever and then there's an excess type of fever, okay? And you need to be able to tell which type you're having or what type you're observing in order to appropriately, affect change, right? So you can bring about a resolution of that fever into a place of balance. And in an excess fever, generally, it would come on pretty quickly. And it's a high fever that the temperature is high, and even to the point where you'll start to see that there's symptoms in the person with a high fever. And again, this is excess heat that is some extra. There's more heat than the body can deal with. This is where it gets interesting because for one person, a fever at, let's say that the level is 103.5. That fever might be for them, this fever is pretty hot. It's 103.5. But the person actually is like, hey, I'm totally feel good. I'm calm. I'm not really having any issues. I don't have any pains. My energy is good. My mind is clear. That person's okay with that 103.5 degree fever, as I look at them. But someone else with the same fever might have a lot of symptoms. They might be fatigued. They might be listless. They might be wan. They might be slurring their words. That person is having an excess heat that's affecting them negatively. We have to deal with that. So just looking at it differently. So when I do say that an excess fever, I use a number like 105 because that's pretty high for most people. It's getting into a place where there's more heat than the body can really easily adapt to. And so at that place, we say, okay, what are we going to do about that? We're probably going to need to cool that fever down, right? And this concept of excess and deficiency will help us know what do we need to do, especially when we're in those places where, well, the fever isn't 105 or 106. It's not like it's not clearly this big excess. Maybe it's 101.5, but is it really an excess fever or is it a deficiency fever? Because people can be in a weakened state where their body starts manifesting a fever. This is where you start looking at the whole picture. The person with the 105, 106 degree fever, you can see their heart rate is up. They've got this elevated heart rate. Maybe their blood pressure is up. Maybe they've got redness in their face. Gosh, you touch they're just like burning up hot. And they're just like, they have a huge aversion to heat, right? They just want to be cold. They want to be cooled down. That's that excess heat. The deficiency fever is different. This person is sort of feeling like they feel off. They don't feel themselves maybe, but they're more like they're tired. You know, they have other layers of symptoms that we can start to pick out as we start to get into this deeper assessment. We do our Sherlock Holmes work, right? Where we start to actually ask them some questions about what's happening. And in some cases, there's actually what we would call a qi and blood deficiency leading to this deficiency fever. That's a whole different picture. So again, easier to describe the excess side, a little more nuanced for the deficiency side, but just another example of how excess and deficiency manifests in people and how important it is to be able to tease out those differences. If you look at excess, in terms of like, let's say we went down into the microscope, can I apply the principles to what I see in the microscope? Can I apply them to cells? Yeah, sure you can. You can apply them to cells. Is it an excess condition or deficiency condition? And there are layers to this where a deficient condition, if you looked at the red blood cells, well, the red blood cells, there wouldn't be enough of them, right? If the bone marrow is deficient, you would see in the blood a deficiency of white blood cells, or deficiency of red blood cells, deficiency of platelets, the formed elements that make up the blood. You would see lower numbers of them, fewer numbers of them. That's a quantification, right? You could even qualify some of the blood cells, like the platelets, like how big are they? Are they swollen or are they small? You know, the shape of them, of the cells. These things change. There's qualities too that start to help us understand. But if a person has, an elevated white blood cell count, let's say that the white blood cell count is 20,000 instead of the normal range of 4 to 10,000, you start suspecting, well, what's going on? Well, if the body's doing something differently, and there's an excess of this material. So you'd say, okay, well, maybe it's an infection, right? And the body's mounting a big fight against this, imbalanced microorganism in the body. That could be. Maybe the person has leukemia, right? Maybe they have reckless heat, we would describe it, in the blood or in the bone marrow that's disrupted the actual manufacture of white blood cells in the marrow so that they're pumping out really rapidly. And then you have this proliferation of them and overgrowth of them where they take over the space in the bone marrow and in the blood, as in a blood cancer, like a leukemia, right? And of course, we know that if you go down deeper to the level of the genetics, we would see that there's mutations that have occurred there, altering the cell's function. But that excess is the heat of the replication of this growing and growing and growing of these cells. Of course, over time, as that reckless heat grows, what happens? You start to see deficiencies of everything else. There's because you've used up the energy in the body, the materials to make this excess unfold, and then it leaves behind lots of deficiencies. So I think this is, again, an introduction to one of these pairs of principles that make up the 8 principles, excess and deficiency. And I'd love to talk to you more about it. Feel free to ask me any questions you want, jump on the chat. And if we can clarify each of these 8 principles, each one of you will be better equipped. You'll have more tools to help others and to help yourself too, and to realize, where are you? Are you in a hot place? Are you in an excess place? Are you in a deficiency place? And then be able to apply, therapies, lifestyle changes, dietary support to help yourself be in a more balanced and healthful state.